Hello. Jean and I are very upset that we cannot be present with you this afternoon. Jean's surgery on her hip was on Friday, and her recuperation continues in the hospital until Monday, when she'll move to a rehab facility for intensive physical therapy and then move on to home. But you can understand, I hope, that we both want to be together during this intensive time and therefore are unable to join you. When I think of Bill Heywood, I think of food. Mashed potato sandwiches, brisket all sorts of ways, and if it had more butter or gravy or grease, all the better. Bill was a great host, and so was Julie. They took care of Rob while John was born. It was going to be a day or so there in the end of October, but Jean had to stay in the hospital for several days, and they kept Rob without complaint, dressed him up as Charlie Chaplin, took him around for trick-or-treating, for which we were completely unprepared, and we connected with him. He was none the worse for the wear. They were godparents to John, and have allowed us to be guests in their home any number of times. It was where I discovered the joys of Sunday stupor in the rocking chair that turned into a recliner, and so much more. Some wonderful meals and wonderful times with the whole family, and especially with Bill. Today I want to talk about three things that I think of when I think of Bill. The first is friendliness. One time Bill and Julie called us early in the year and started commenting about our Christmas letter that we'd sent out. I'd written it that year. I talked about visiting our friends, the Heywoods, and then going on to see our dear friend so-and-so and our special friend so-and-so. And the Heywoods wanted to know, all within this circle of friendliness and good humor, what does it take to be a dear friend or a special friend, not just a friend? Well, we laughed about it then, and I learned, and we laughed about it almost every time we saw each other from that point forward, because it was a great opportunity for me to learn, but for them to show that friendliness that was a part of who they were, and especially who Bill was. It got him in trouble sometimes. He would compliment someone. He went over, I think, to the preschool one time and complimented a staff member on how she looked. It was reported to the pastor, Emma Moore-Koklix, and Emma had to have a conversation, HR style, with Bill about what he could and could not say to someone. He talked about it flummoxed, really, because it was so much a part of who he was. It was in his bones to be friendly, and that he felt seemed like he could compliment somebody or should compliment somebody if they were looking especially good. But he learned his lesson. He followed the guidelines, I think, very well from that point forward. But it was something that was hard for him because friendliness was so much a part of who he was. He did not know a stranger and did not have an enemy. He could deal with important and crucial issues very seriously. But there was that aura, that foundation of friendliness that was Bill Heywood. The second thing that I think of and about Bill is that he was a great teacher. He might not be thought of by many of you as a teacher, but I think he was. He was an excellent one. I remember being on retreat with the youth group in Camp Cedar Glen, and there was free time. Some of the kids were playing board games and card games, and Bill looked to me and said, "Have you ever played solitaire?" And I No, I don't know anything about it. He said, well, here, let me show you. So he dealt out the cards and played a game, explaining the rules to me as we went along. And then he had me deal out the cards and play a game myself. And he said, well, that's it. Those are the rules. You have a good time. So I played a few more games. I was interested in the possibilities and the connections and how one thing leads to another. That was kind of fun. I cannot tell you how many thousands of games I've played of solitaire over the years. And each time I think of Bill and his teaching me how to play solitaire. Years later, I was at their home, again, one of those hospitable times when they allowed us to stay with them. And I said to Bill, what is it? You didn't teach me about all the nuances of solitaire, about the strategies and the chances, the ways to kind of weigh your options, and even card counting. He said, well, of course not. That was for you to learn on your own. He taught the essentials and then backed off. That's a good teacher, I think. And it certainly was a good opportunity for me to see the kind of way that he behaved. And he did that with the youth group as a youth counselor. He would teach them the basics. He would share his views. He would share his values, his decisions, his ethics. But he also listened to young people without correcting, cared for them, and in that aura of friendliness also was able to share genuinely and caringly the basics and then let them discover the remainder of what it was like to live a Christian life. A good teacher. Bill was also a willing person. He was surrounded. He was just full of willingness. He was able to find a job, to find something to do that would be helpful. While Julie was the financial secretary, Bill discovered that one of the things that she needed was a little help on software. So he would come down and help her a little bit on the software. And he discovered that other people needed a little bit of help. Again, the teaching and the hospitality were part of it. But then he used that sense of willingness to grow into a position at the church office. It was not something he sought, not something he somehow angled for, but something he was willing to step into. Other people might have seen it as too small a thing for someone of his power and capacity as a former executive for a major company, but he was able to do that job as well as anyone. And I appreciate his ability to do that, his willingness to step in and to see a way that he could be helpful and to do it. I also am especially aware of a particular experience while I was at La Jolla. I called the Heywoods and asked if I could meet with the family. So I went over, and Glenn and Steve and Kathy were in the room, and so was Bill and Julie. And I made my pitch for Bill and Julie to become the senior high youth counselors. We were going to form a new senior high group. It had been formerly been a combined youth group, but now we had more senior highs, and it was going to be time to form a separate group. And I needed them to step into that. I knew about them. I knew their abilities. I could trust them. And I asked them to take on the responsibility. There was a silence after I'd made my pitch, and then I noticed over to the side of the room, there's Kathy, and she's weeping. And I said, Kathy, what the world? What's wrong with you? What's upsetting? And she said, I know they're going to say yes, and I wanted to have my senior high years without my family. So you wanted that independence, and you wanted to be on your own. I understand that completely. And Just as I was about to back off, Bill said, "We'll do it. She's right. We're going to do it." I obviously still remember that acceptance. In the face of objection, it was a willingness that Bill had to step in, to do what was needed, to use his skills and time in a way that was effective and was what the church needed and what young people needed. Bill was a person who was willing and a good teacher and hospitable. What a great person Bill has been. How many other gifts he has given, you all know. But I invite you to celebrate Bill this day as we do with you. Bill Heywood, absent from the body, present in the spirit. Amen.